Good morning, everyone. Let me see here. Okay, so I just want to do a quick video and audio check to make sure that you guys can hear me and that you can see me. And I guess I would also add that you can see, I'm not sure if I'm sharing the right screen right now, so let me double check that. It looks a little better. Okay, haven't heard from anybody yet. Okay, it looks like Taylor can hear and see me, so that's a good sign. Hi, Lauren. I'm so happy somebody outside the building can hear me. We just got a few more moments before we get started here. Okay, my watch just went off, so I think we are, check my phone here real quick. 10 o'clock? Okay, so give me just 1 second and okay, it looks like that was a little weird. I usually start the recording. I do an audio check and start the recording, but it looks like the recording started automatically. So we are live and we are ready to go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Church 360 Ledger Getting Started with New Ledger webinar. Hi, my name is Rod Kiles and I am the manager of Concordia Technology Solutions Support. I've been here for a long time now. Been here for years and years and years, and it's just really been a blessing to be able to serve churches over all of these years. My contact information is rod.kiles@cph.org, and you can reach me by phone here on my desk phone at 314-268-1315. So we're going to cover quite a few things today. We're going to work through kind of introducing people to the software and teaching them how to use how to get their data into the new program. So, but you guys will have questions. You can contact me, you can contact support, and we can kind of, work through the whole process. Note, all phones and microphones have been muted. Type any questions you may have into the question window. So I'm using the web-based version here, and there should be a question panel, like there's a little icon with a question in it, which will allow you to just type your question in there and get those questions answered. Joining me to answer those questions today in support is Kimberly Moon. She's one of our support technicians. She helped with us going through the field testing process of New Ledger. So she knows the product and she can answer any questions that you have. She's one of our software support technicians here at Concordia Technology Solutions. She's been here a couple of years now and she'll be here along for the ride. Let's go ahead and go through our agenda. I like to kind of run these webinars in a very similar pattern. I did make one little tweak though. So we're going to go through the discussion. We'll have a list of things that we want to talk about to kind of get you on board with the new software. We're going to have, instead of a question and answer session, usually we'll have like a poll, you answer it and go forward from there. We're going to do an FAQ. So we're going to have what we call frequently asked questions or commonly asked questions more than anything since the software is so new. But we're going to go through some of those questions. And then there'll be plenty of time at the end for you to ask any questions that you have, and we'll answer them at that point in time. Now, this is one of 4 webinars that you guys may be familiar with that whole thing. So this is the first one. It's really like getting started, an introductory webinar, but we're going to show you how to migrate your data or get your data into the program. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about the chart of accounts and budgets. Then Wednesday, we're going to talk about transactions. And Thursday, we're going to talk about reports and reconciliation. So there'll be some questions that will come in today that I won't answer until later on in the week. But feel free to post any questions. If it makes sense, I'll definitely answer it right now. I don't want to mess anything up, but we love to hear from you now and along this journey as we move forward. So. We are taking feedback, so as you go through and use the software, it's going to be new for us, new for you guys, but we'll take the feedback, we'll store that in review, and I'll talk more about feedback here just shortly. So I put a little note down at the bottom. These webinars are recorded and will be available at the end of the week, so we'll have those out there so that people can go back, watch these, and review them if they'd like. Of course, you can always contact us as well. So let's go ahead and go through the different topics that we are going to cover. So we'll start out with what I'm calling the pre-flight review. So the majority of customers who are going to go through what we're talking about today with migrating your data from old ledger to new ledger, they're going to want to go through a little bit of a pre-flight process, just a few questions to kind of ask and things to discuss amongst yourselves there at the church. And there's a couple changes that you're going to want to discuss and think about as well. So we'll go through that little pre-flight review. Then after that, we're going to talk about new site navigation. A lot of you guys have seen it already, but there is a new site navigation in Church360 members, which is really Church360 now. So we'll go through that and show you like the changes that you can expect if you haven't seen them already and how to navigate that product. That's just a few minutes of the process. Then we'll actually do a migration. The migration is really simple. We got it pared down, but we're going to walk you through the migration so that you can understand how your data will transfer from old ledger into new ledger. There's also logins and permissions. So we're talking about migrating. We're talking about moving data from old ledger to new ledger. Well, if you don't have a login in Church360, then you won't have access to new ledger. So we'll discuss that as well. Then, of course, now that we've got everything in there, we've got logins, that's an overview of New Ledger and kind of show you a few things. And then, of course, we'll go into more depth Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So let's get started. So I have one more slide, but literally, let's get started. This is super exciting. Pre-flight. So I'm going to go through these 5 bullets, and there's a little waggle here on one. So pre-flight, discuss new navigation with your team. So when it comes to this new navigation that I'll show here in just a second, it is required for Church360 for new ledger. So for you to be able to actually access the icon and some of the other features, you do have to switch over to the new navigation. By Contacting us and working through this process of migrating your data, it is required. And that means that that change will take effect for everybody who's using your Church 360 site. So we don't surprise anybody. We're just making sure to mention it up front. Hey, here's the deal. The navigation will be different. I don't think it's greatly different, but it is different. And different means there might be questions. So um, definitely discuss your new navigation with your team. We're going to say take a look at the print queue. So with the print queue, whenever you go to create checks, your checks will flow into the print queue. And those checks actually flow over to new ledger, but you just want to take a look at it, see what's going on inside the print queue, if any of those need to be dismissed or removed. Look at recurring transactions. I'm going to talk about that more here in just a second when I get into old ledger. Close out any pending transactions. So you're moving from one software to a new software, though very similar in lots of aspects. You need to close out those pending transactions so that your balances are what you want them to be before you move into new ledger. So that one has a little asterisk or star by it. Like, it's definitely an action item. It's not looking or reviewing or making note or anything like that. This is something you need to do. You need to go ahead and close out those pending transactions, and we'll talk more about that as well. So this is our pre-flight checklist. Discuss the new navigation, look at your print queue, look at recurring transactions, close out your pending transactions, and review payees. So let's look at the software. So we're going to start by taking a look at Old Ledger. And this is a product that you've been using for years and years now. Maybe not years and years, but it has been out for quite a while. I think we released in 2014, 2013, 2014. Can't exactly remember there, but we did release this software back then, and it's looked like this for the most part the whole time. Like, this has been the navigation, and this is what the software looked like. So all of the data, the majority of the data is going to transfer over. There's just a couple things that won't transfer, but going through your pre-flight checklist will give you an idea of that type of data, and it'll also help you understand, what you should see. Like, these are our current balances, assets, our current balances for assets, our current balances for liabilities, our income, and our expenses. Now, this is some of my sample data, so it's not like greatly populated, but I'll have some more data for our following trainings over the next 3 days. Now, when you're looking at these balances across the top, you just want to make note and say, okay, well, this is, $1 million in assets. When we get over to New Ledger and we've completed this migration, we should have that $1,038,071.65 in assets. And we should have this amount in liabilities, this amount in expenses, and if it's zero income, then that is the way it should show when we get into the new software. Going across the top, I did mention the pending transactions. So I have one check in my print queue, and then I don't have any pending transactions in this dummy site, but you'll have pending transactions in your drop list. Or you may have pending transactions in your drop list. If you do, you're going to want to take care of those pending transactions, just making sure that they are resolved. We're kind of, drawing a line, making sure our balances are correct before we get into the new software. So when it comes to pending transactions, you definitely want to make sure that those are closed out. They're generated and they're moved. Pending transactions contains deposits that flow over from Church 360 members, Church 360. It also contains your recurring transactions. So those recurring transactions, that could be checks or deposits, could be payroll transactions, like all of those that are recurring will just flow here directly into pending transactions, and you click on them and you generate them at that point in time. So you'll want to take care of those before you go through the migration process. Then let's just take a look, click on gear and click on recurring transactions. And my screen is blank, but there's lots of people, and I can't remember the exact numbers, but there's a good percentage of people who use recurring transactions. Why would you use a recurring transaction? The reason why you would use one is because it allows you to have a transaction as a template and then use that template over and over again without having to fully recreate the transaction every single time. Now, there's two ways to create recurring transactions, and this is where that dynamic of, hey, we need to make sure that we review them prior to the migration comes into play. Not all your recurring transactions will migrate. So, and when I say that, I'm saying that, hey, since there's two ways to create them, only one of those two ways is going to migrate. So when you create a recurring transaction, you have two choices. You can go to new transaction, you can select the type of transaction you want to create, and then you can mark it as make recurring. Okay, those will not migrate over. If you have a transaction, so I'm going to go to the orange $ here, and you click on that transaction, and then you say make recurring transactions, that those types will go ahead and migrate over. So it's just a slight difference. This one is from a pre-existing transaction. So with it being a pre-existing transaction, it has like an anchor within the system that we can migrate over and then spin up the recurring transaction. The other one doesn't have the anchor, so those won't migrate over. Not to worry though, if like when you get to the end, you'll still have old ledger and new ledger. So when you'll have old ledger and new ledger, you'll be able to compare the two. So when you get to the end of it, say you had 10 recurring transactions, 7 of them came over, you'll just go down the list and then you'll be able to say, okay, well, these 3 aren't here. You'll just manually create those 3 recurring transactions. It wasn't what we really wanted, but it's really something we had to do. So, like that's one of the ones where, hey, we have to make sure that we just double check our recurring transactions so that we don't end up in a situation where we're expecting that transaction to show up and it's not there. And then we're kind of wondering why, what's going on. Okay. Then there's one other thing I want to show in here before we jump into New Ledger and kind of talk about that then for a minute. So the other thing is gear and payees. So one thing that was allowed inside of old ledger, there was the possibility to create duplicate payees and duplicate accounts, leading to confusion. At times people would have the same account in the system twice, the same payee in the system twice. We've added in a validation check. No longer can you have duplicate payees and duplicate accounts. When we migrate over, if you have one of those two, what will happen is they will put a random number at the end to make it unique, and then you can go in and make changes. If you want to review your payees beforehand to get an understanding of how many of these accounts will have an additional number at the end of them, you can definitely do that. It's just nothing's going to be lost or anything like that. It's just you can expect there to be a number for those duplicates. And there were some people who had no duplicates. There were some who had quite a few duplicates. And those duplicate accounts had to have been causing problems if you're ever trying to generate reports or find information that is out there. I'm going to pause just a second and say good morning to Catherine and answer her questions. She says, and I think other people will have this question as well, so that's why I'm pausing here for a second. When was the software change going to happen? So right now it is voluntary. It's like, hey, one of those things, you get to see the software, contact us. There are onboarding sessions that I haven't talked about yet. And of course, you can migrate the data yourself. It's pretty easy if you'd like, but if you'd like us to walk you through it and go through some training sessions, that is possible as well. It's not going to last forever that both of these softwares are going to be available. At some point, there's going to be a cutoff point. And we're encouraging people as we get close to the end of the year to consider migrating over, considering kicking the tires, beginning to understand the software. There's no forced migration at this point in time. But at some point, both softwares won't be available and then people will have to move forward. So as you go through, take your time, learn the software. There are some benefits, and I haven't talked about that yet in New Ledger. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things where, hey, take your time, figure out what's going on. It won't be forever though. Okay, so thanks, Catherine. I appreciate that. Okay, so and that is payees. So that is the last thing. And actually, let me show one more. Just kind of squeeze this one in. I'm going to show fiscal years. And when I said all the data was going to migrate over, yeah, all the data migrates over except for those couple things. So, and I'll talk about one more here in just a second. When you get ready to migrate, you're going to want to make sure your fiscal years are locked. And the reason why you want to make sure the fiscal years are locked is when your fiscal years are locked appropriately, your income and expense balances show here on the home screen correct. We're going to be doing a comparison post-migration. And if you don't have those fiscal years locked, then you won't be able to do a one-to-one comparison. So that's under the year and that's under fiscal years. Now these locks can be a little confusing. You'll notice how it's locked, or gray lock, 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 all the way down here to this green lock. And you'll notice that these are locked and this one is unlocked. Well, these icons represent, like the colored icon, represents the action, not the state. So it goes from gray is the state of these. This one here is the action. So when it says the green lock, it's actually locked. So if I was to click on that, it would technically unlock this book to allow us to make changes, showing us a red lock, which allows us to lock it back. It's a little confusing. You just want to make sure that your prior fiscal year has the green lock on it so that when you get ready to move forward, all your balances are showing here in old ledger to match the balances that are going to show in new ledger. So technically green lock unlocked means that it's locked. This is just the action to unlock it. Okay, so I'm on First Community Church here, and I'm going to go to First Community Church. So these are technically two sites. And as you guys are aware, Old Ledger was in another site and Church360 Members was, Old Ledger was in one site and Church360 Members was in a different site. We are moving Old Ledger into Church360, so it's in the same area as Church360 Members. Let me close this down here. So inside of this view, you'll see down the side, you'll see your icons. There's people, events, offerings, communications, the $ for ledger, and then our reports and our gear. So I'm going to expand this window here so that we can see the words. You'll notice that my toolbar, my main navigation bar, is running down the left-hand side, and it's actually in the same order. And this was the navigation change I was talking about. For us to be able to do all of the things that we wanted to do, we had to make some changes. Like we were getting to the point that there was going to be too many buttons across the top. We needed to kind of conceal a little bit of space or retrieve a little bit of space and have it running down the side. So it's in the same order. We did make one difference. We made several differences, made several changes. We moved events, we moved attendance under events. So our attendance and our attendance calendars are now under events. So that is one big change that we made. For you that have already switched over, you've seen that. Hopefully you've been able to find it relatively easy. But that's one change that we had to make so that we didn't have too many items. Who knows what the future holds? You know, the plan is to continue to add in more features and continue to grow the product. And to be able to do that, we needed more space. So that's why we decided to switch from the horizontal navigation to this vertical navigation. So the little bell is now at the top, and as you close and collapse, that bell is still there so that you can receive messages from either the software or from us, and you'll be able to click and view those, dismiss those as you would like. Down at the bottom is our profile icon, also our user settings and our logout button. So everything's vertical going forward. We combined all of our settings So we had a couple settings in different places, but we needed one place to put all our settings because we were going to be bringing in the settings from old Ledger and moving those into new Ledger, and figuring out exactly how to do that and present the information in the right way, we decided, hey, move all the settings into one location so that we can find them. So I'm going to go into settings and just show that briefly. Excuse me just one second. Okay. Okay, so underneath settings, what we've done is we went ahead and um, grouped them together by their modules. So we're calling these items here on the left modules. So there's people, events, offerings, communications, ledger. Then there's reports and the gears. So people, events, offerings, communications, ledger. And it starts out with general, where there's just general information, but then there's also our integrations and our admin area. So there's some changes we made. We needed more space, so we kind of did another horizontal, another vertical bar, and we grouped those together so that when you went in here and you started looking for the pieces that you wanted, you'd be able to see them by a grouping, by a header. So books and payees, these are shared amongst all of your books. Books and payees, of course, are shared amongst books, but they're shared amongst all of your books. So you should be able to access those in one single place. So books and payees are accessed here. We also have integrations, and we group the integrations together. There's the Vanco integration, which allows you to use electronic offering and to port that into Church360 members. There's the Paycor integration that's still under construction, but that allows you to import your payroll information into Church360 Ledger, into the new ledger. It doesn't go into the old ledger, but into the new ledger. And it allows you to pull that information in. So let's go ahead and let's go through the migration, and then we'll come back to this view here in a second to go over logins and roles a little bit further. Okay, so here underneath the $sign, whenever you first go into New Ledger, it's going to land you on this zero state screen. And this zero state screen, it's zero state. So like there's nothing in here. And you'll have three options. You'll have add a book, migrate your data, and upload your database. So um, add a book gives you the option to just create and start from scratch. So there's going to be people who are completely new to the Church360 universe. They'll go in here, they'll add a book, they'll click that book, and then they'll go in and create their chart of accounts. After they create their chart of accounts, they'll add in payees, they'll follow that up with transactions, and they're literally going through that whole manual process. And some of you have been through that process as well. So getting started, it could be add a book. We have around 500 customers that are using Church360 Ledger, old Church360 Ledger. And those customers will most likely all want to migrate their data over. So they'll pull their data into Church360 from into Church360, literally into the new ledger from the old ledger. And then we also have customers, we support 2 church management software. There's also going to be some customers who are going to convert from Shepherd Staff to the new ledger at that point in time. So, and you'll be able to upload your database. Just this morning, they released an update that allows you to import versions 9.1. So pretty much if you have a version of Shepherd Staff and you decide that, hey, you want to switch from old ledger from Shepherd Staff to new ledger, you'll have the option to do that. We can bring your data in and pull all of that information over. So it's exciting, it's new, and it's pretty fun. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the migrate data. This is going to pull the old information into the new information. I will show the upload Shepherd Staff data tomorrow. So, okay, so this utility will import, and I'm going to read through these just a little bit. We try to keep this as simple as possible. It's literally only has a handful of clicks to get all the way through this migration. If you want to migrate, you can definitely schedule an onboarding session, but you can also shoot us an email and you can walk through these steps on your own if you would like. So start migration. I'm going to read 1 and 2 first. There's 2 lanes when it comes to migrating this data. This utility will import books, accounts, categories, transactions, payees, budgets, fiscal years, reconciliations, and recurring transactions. After you start it, it'll just give you this real-time window, and we'll sit here and watch it. It takes about 3 minutes for it to migrate the data over. So I'll go through some of the details of that migration. But it'll have this real-time summary. Little things will be spinning on the screen, and you'll be able to see those numbers appear. Once it's migrated the data, then we need to deal with logins, with access. So we pulled the data over. We have a treasurer and several other people who are using old ledger. They may or may not have access to new ledger. And let me restate that. They may or may not have access to Church360. So there's 2 things we have to do. We're going to need to give them access to Church360 or review their access at that point in time. And we're going to go through that here today. So I'm going to say start data migration. That's going to take just a second. And then a window is going to pop up for me. Okay. And going from left to right, well, let's go top to bottom first. So books, fiscal years, payees, accounts, budgets, reconciliations, transactions, and recurring transactions. So in looking at this, going left to right now, there's collections, created, invalid, skipped, and total. And then there's the time. And the time is, and actually I have the little swirly guy. This swirly guy, before he disappears on me, is to let me know that something is going on, like actions are taking place. And we have a little utility that can let us know that this migration is still working. Now, it's going to give you created, invalid, skipped, and total. So the created, invalid, skipped should equal our total. So if you add in created, invalid, and skipped, and that should equal our total at that point in time. This is more just troubleshooting what may have happened. For the most part, every once in a while we get a little error or whatever. If you do, we're going to get a message about the migration. You can reach out to us. We're going to reach out to you with any of our findings when it comes to this. We'll shoot you an email. But it'll go through and create all of these items. When it comes to the budgets, just a few things to note. You'll notice how it has 3,972 budgets. The budget number is going to be elevated. It's going to be high. The way the system counts, it's going to be one budget for every account for every month for all of the budgets that you've created over the years. And I think this site had like 12 years. So you've got 12 years, you've got all of those income and expense accounts, and then you also have 12 months in every single year. So like for it to be 4,000 budgets, that seems really high. When you think, well, isn't it closer to, 12 times the number of my accounts? Well, technically it's 12 times, so 12 years times 12 months, then take that by your number of accounts. And that's how you end up with such a large number. I haven't done any reconciliations, but your reconciliations will port over as well. And you'll be able to find those in what we're calling the account details view. If for some reason your reconciliations don't port over, just reach out to us. I think we only had like one little instance of that happening. We've had between 40 and 50 customers migrate already. So there's quite a few that have migrated, and we're just kind of moving forward with it. Transactions, the transactions is the one that takes the longest. It's the largest part of the data. Transactions, you have like literally a transaction, but then each transaction has a minimum of 2 line items. So those 2 line items, or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 9 or 10, it just takes a while for all of those transactions to migrate over. When you see transactions, I believe that it is skipped. So I mentioned a couple things that don't migrate. One was a recurring transaction, but two is it doesn't transfer over the initial balance transactions. Okay. And the reason why it doesn't, it does a calculation. And some of you guys may have seen that, hey, we're doing equity. Like before equity was hidden, it was kind of in the background, where we're bringing equity forward. And the fact that we're bringing equity forward, give me just 1 second. I need to restate something. I'm going to finish that thought about it. The fact that we're bringing equity forward, that allows us to show our account balances, our beginning thing. And when I said the transactions, I said initial balance transactions were not coming over. That is not true. Please roll the tape back, scratch through that. It's not the initial balance transactions that are not coming over. It's the year-end closing transactions. And that's how we get to the equity and the rebalancing and making sure everything's correct, pulling equity forward. So whenever you get to the end of the year, you close out the year, it zeroes out your income and expense. That income and expense difference, your retained income goes into your equity and everything is in balance. For those that are familiar with equity, using equity isn't required, but there were a lot of people who were like, where's the equity? How do we access it? How do we view it? Which is a fair question, because assets equals liability plus equity. And if you don't have equity and you're familiar with it, you're like, where is it? Why isn't it here? So equity is a thing. It's not required, but those people who are accountants or financial people or even long-term corporate financial officers, like they want to see it. So we've added it. We tried to make it not so intrusive and give you the choice to pick it up or not. So, and then recurring transactions. I didn't have any, but if those recurring transactions don't have a base transaction, then it will be invalid. And you'll just have to manually recreate those few recurring transactions. It'll, we're talking a handful of minutes to get those in there. Okay. So continue to logins and roles. So once you click the one button, you'll just kind of watch this real-time screen to see what's going on, and then you'll continue to logins and roles. So we're going to match up our logins, and then we're going to assign them to our roles. So inside of Church360 Ledger, the old Church360 Ledger, you had a user, and that user had a role inside the software. And what do roles do? Roles determine what can or cannot be done inside a program. So old Ledger had a role. We added in roles inside of Church360 here, and then we have to kind of match those up. Now, some people will have logins, and you'll have to tie those two logins together, and this allows you to do that. Some people won't have logins, and you'll literally be giving them access to Church360. And some people were users of old Ledger, and they won't be users of new Ledger. Like they've moved away, they've moved on, their role in the church has changed. Not to confuse words there, but things have changed. So this screen is where you're going to do a lot of that work. And it's going to be important to review this and also afterwards to review who can see what. So let's go through the process. So I'm going to start out with my associate Kimberly here, kimberly.moon@cph.org. And it's going to ask you a question. And there's three options. So does this person have the ability to log into Church360 members already? It's yes, no, or skip migrating this user. And so I'm going to say yes for Kimberly. And then if Kimberly has a login, I can connect those two. Now I'm the only one who has a login in this test site. So instead of saying yes, I'm going to say no. And then it says, no problem. We found someone in your church, Kimberly Moon, with this email address. So then I'll go back, and these are the permissions this login had in old Ledger. And basically she had everything. She was an administrator. So then I can either say, hey, make her a Ledger administrator in the new software if that's my desire, or I can add or create a role. So I can say add a role. And let's say that this is, I'll go auditor. And then say can view all books, or if I uncheck it, so it starts out unchecked, I can select a book or multiple books at that point in time. It turned out that churches had quite a few books, so you can go through and select one or more books that they can have access to. But I'm going to say that since she's an auditor, she can view all the books, and then can view all accounts, show picker, and then either I can pick a handful of accounts. So I could say, okay, well, Central Trust and Farmers, and then I could include other ones if I wanted to. The highlighted ones are the ones that are selected. If I want to uncheck something, I could go through and unclick it. And then when I move my mouse away, the highlight will be gone at that point in time. So I'm gonna have the choice. I can select accounts. I can also say can view all accounts, and then pick the other ones that I want the person to be able to see. So it's a mix of things where like, hey, I can see it, or I can manage it, or I can create it. If you have the ability to create, you also have the ability to delete. So as we go through this process in reviewing it, when I say delete or void, those types of things. So reviewing your roles is going to be important. Like we just don't want to carte blanche give everybody everything that they had before. So can reconcile transactions. So we're going to say that these are the rights that we want Kimberly to have. So I'm going to say can view all books and view all accounts, and then click save. Then I'm going to click auditor and click done. And as we go through the next 3 sessions, I'll talk more about roles and permissions. But then from there, I'm going to say Rod, that's me. I'm going to say yes, and I do have a login, so I've got to click the drop-down box. You'll notice how it's light gray right here. That light gray means that I'm in Church360 members, inside of Church360. I still need to click here and select my name so that it's black, and then say Ledger Administrator and click Done at that point in time. So, and I'm going to click Done on Kimberly Moon as well. These little checks will appear. Then I'll go to Taylor Brown, and let's say that she's no longer using Church360 Ledger, old Ledger, and I'm going to say skip migrating this user. So once I've addressed all of the users here inside the system, then I'll say save selection. It'll save, and then it'll give me the option to complete the migration. Okay. So once the migration completes, here we go. We're in the software, and this is what it looks like. Like it's similar in some aspects, but also different. A request that we had from lots of customers based on feedback was floating some information forward. And we did that here by adding in this overview. And the overview is going to have to-do items, top accounts, top funds. So that's a new concept that we've added in. And earlier I was like, hey, customers, talked about equity and wondered about equity. Well, the concept of funds sits in the equities part of our accounting equation. So we added in the concept of funds, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow during our chart of accounts training. So, and then there's also income and expense, which everybody wants to know about. Okay, so you're going to land here on the overview. You're going to get a snapshot of information. Once we complete the migration, then there's going to be ledger, and I'm going to go back to old ledger just for a second. And you see the assets, liabilities, income, and expense. You're just going to want to compare the information, the balances in old ledger to new ledger. So this is $1,038,071.65. $1,038,071.65. And our other balances match as well. Now, you'll notice that we floated our equity to the top. It was hidden in the background, and we brought it forward. And then you can also see your income and expense. And currently the funds are zero. In old ledger, we had the concept of restricted funds. We didn't remove that concept, but we did add in the concept of what we're calling equity-backed funds. Restricted funds and equity-backed funds are not the same. And we'll get into that real heavy tomorrow, just so that the concept is simple. We didn't take away any functionality. If you like your restricted funds, you literally can continue to use them. This is not, but for those people who want to use the new thing, they can set up funds and they can transition through that process. Okay, so this here is our ledger overview. We're going to go back to the gear and we are going to talk about our logins and roles just a little bit further. So now we've decided, hey, we've moved all of our financial data from old ledger into new ledger. We're here inside of Church360 and questions are going to arise. Hey, who can see what? Who can do what? Who can clickety clack on what? Like those are questions. Wait a second. They're going to be like, hold up, what is going on? So it's going to be important to review this. Like we went through the review of the access that we were going to give people who were coming from old ledger and moving into new ledger. And we reviewed that. Now, you'll also want to review who can see what inside of Church360. So I've only got a couple users here. Your church might have 30, 40 users inside the program. And when they come in, anybody who is, and I'm going to say note this, anybody who's a people administrator, they will get access to be a ledger administrator. There's going to have to be some changes. So with this here, when we went into redesigning this, there was feedback around who had rights to see what, and there was conversation around, hey, pastors shouldn't be able to see the finances, and even some of the other people who are in the software shouldn't be able to see the finances, but we want to be able to divide that out. To be able to do that, we created administrators for each module: people administrators, event administrators, offering administrators, communication administrators, and ledger administrators. But there still needed to be a system administrator, somebody who had rights to dig in and invite people and remove people and control all of that. That person is the people administrator. It doesn't mean the treasurer can't be a people administrator and a ledger administrator, but the people administrator is where the power sits when it comes to that. So if you have somebody who's in Church360 members, who's in Church360 software, and they are a people administrator, once you migrate over, if you're one of those churches where everybody's an administrator, that means they all have access to Ledger at this point in time. So you'll want to go in and review this. You can edit, and then you can unclick Ledger Administrator and click Save, and then that will take away that person's Ledger administration rights. So I'm Rod though, so I'm going to give myself back those rights so that we can talk about a few more of these screens. But please, when you get done, go ahead and review them, add in and take out rights that should not be there. And it typically should be done once a year. That's the process, that's the approach, to make sure people don't have access or too much access. It is always easier to give people less access than more access. Pulling that access back, it's always, not always, but most of the time it's a confrontation. So if you start out with less and then dev it out appropriately, it'll be better at that point in time. Okay. So people, events, attendance, offerings, people, events, which is also attendance, then offerings, communication, and ledger. Then I'm going to go to roles just for a second, just so that you guys can see the change that we made. Across the top, there's people, events, offerings, communication, and ledger as well. And you can go in and you can add in roles. This is going to show you the breakdown, show you each one of the items that can be assigned. You'll notice how our ledger administrator has rights to everything, and our auditor can view accounts and can view books. And then they'll be able to just see those things. And reports has its own special permissions, and I'll talk more about that during our Thursday conversation when it comes to reports. Okay, so we've got our people in the software. They're using the program. It's going pretty well. Let's go back to Ledger. Okay, so we're here in Ledger, and let's briefly talk about the navigation. So this is a new navigation. The old navigation was pretty good, like it was overall pretty good, but there were some things we still wanted to pull forward and some things we wanted to mash together to make it work. And there was even a couple views that weren't here that customers have been asking for. And I take a second, I want to let everybody know, please send in your feedback. The only way we know, in two facets, please send in your feedback under two facets. Of course, the things you'd like to see, the things you don't like, that is really good feedback. Like, we never would have known equity and the funds and going through that concept if it wasn't for feedback from customers. But also tell us about the things that you like. If we get that information, that prevents us from accidentally cutting something or suppressing something. Hearing both sides of the coin really helps a lot. So when you get this, of course, we'll be taking feedback as we're having the conversation, but send in all of your feedback so that we can figure out what the right next steps are. So we take feedback on all of our products and then we prioritize it and kind of move forward. And this was the prioritization of moving forward with Ledger. And there's going to be a few more things I'm going to talk about here that was based on customer feedback as well. So when you get into new Ledger, across the top you have overview, which is this snapshot dashboard thing. Then there's going to be general ledger. I've only got one transaction, but the general ledger is a transaction view. Everything in old ledger was based on line items, the ledger roles, but here we added a view that actually shows everything by transaction. So I've got this transaction. I'm not going to go too deep into it. When you click on it, you can see the line items underneath. So that's the general ledger view. It allows you to see everything grouped by transaction instead of seeing all your line items expanded. To the right of that is your chart of accounts. In doing onboardings for several years, it's almost been a decade now, but in going through those onboardings, it was clear that people liked the chart of accounts view, being able to see balances and being able to apply actions to their chart of accounts. So we created the chart of accounts view to be able to kind of dig in here, take a look, and use these actions applied to your chart of accounts. So this is more than just the view, it's also a report. There's actions that are applied here where I'm hoping everybody likes it. It worked out pretty well from what I can tell, but let us know and we'll show you the chart of accounts tomorrow and we'll dig into that. To the right of that is financial reports. So old Ledger had, well, technically 4 reports or 4 core reports or main reports. With the new Ledger, we've got 5 main reports, so we're already one better. But it wasn't just simply adding in the old reports or just building this big, long running list of reports. We wanted to create a report writer, and we did. I'll give a shout out to Luke and Pastor Cobbs and the other programmers that worked on that. I won't show the report writer today, but the ability to be able to create your own reports. A lot of the columns are very similar. People wanted different orders, different column headers to be able to collapse and expand, and all of that is in there. So financial reports is where you'll create your financial reports. You'll be able to share them amongst the people who have access to this program. It turned out really good, really good. This is something to be proud of. Budgets is where you will create and view your budgets. All of the information is in here. I don't have any funds at this point in time, but there's going to be income and expense. And when it comes to funds, the funds can be budgeted as well. So all of that information is going to be here. You'll have the choice to budget or not budget certain items. You still have the option to import, to export and import budgets. So lots of times there's a collaborative approach to creating your budget for the year. Well, that can be done outside the program, and then that information can be brought into the program. So, and you can still manually create your budgets. So that's budgets. To the right of that is recurring transactions, and I already saw in the, oh, can I make my screen bigger? Hi, how, how about 125? There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I've already seen there's conversation about recurring transactions. There's definitely some concern there. They all don't import over, but you can work with us, or I think once you see it, you'll also be like, for those people who migrate on their own, they'll be able to create their recurring transactions. But these are our main views. They're right here up front. It allows you to kind of navigate and get through the program. There's one other view that's here that you can't see, but if you go in the chart of accounts and you click on this caret on the right-hand side, so I'm going to say Central Trust Checking. And this is our accounts detail view. So it's an account summary view where there's a balance and all of your transactions and a few other options. So accounts detail view, and I think this one's going to be used quite a bit. Okay, so let me go ahead and mention the 3 grade icons here at the top. General operations, we've only got 1 book, so this doesn't expand, but for those of you who have more than 1 book, you'll be able to click on the book just like you did in Old Ledger and expand or pop open a window where you can then switch books at that point in time. So this is where your book selector will reside. Add transactions. We brought forward all of the transaction types from the old software, and there's nuances to it, and you guys know that. So deposits, payments, checks, transfers, and journal entries, but we added one called payroll, and we changed the layout. So the way it looks is a little bit different, but we think it's going to be easier to use, and we've had some good feedback so far, so I'm confident in that. But you'll be able to create your transactions from here. And then there's also this search option. And with search, you can select what you're searching for. We heard a lot about the search, like the old search just searched for accounts. So we added in a new search where you can go in. It could be all finance, accounts, payees, or transactions. I figure this will probably be how people search for transactions, but I'm going to do accounts so I don't trip myself up. And then you can say checking and press enter. And then that'll allow you to search for your accounts and then click on the account and jump over to that account. So there's going to be several ways that you can find an account, and this is one of them. And we think customers are going to like it. I'm going to click out the box outside the box to close that. So that is this navigation. And then, of course, the items under the gear, under the settings gear where those reside. So let's switch gears just a second and go to what I'm calling common questions. Let's look at the software. So common questions. We've received some questions so far. Usually I do a quiz, but I was like, let's do common questions, and I'll speak to some things that people may ask, and then of course I'll read through the questions and just see if there's anything I need to speak on. Is there a cost to switch over to New Ledger? No, there's no additional cost to migrate your data from Old Ledger to New Ledger. So your current subscription covers the cost of the software. Whenever you want to migrate, just let us know and you'll be able to migrate forward. Is it okay to run Old Ledger and New Ledger side by side? Absolutely. One of the reasons why we decided to go with this approach, of course, there was comparing of the balances and everything, but also when it comes to finances, you can't necessarily shut down one thing before you go to the new thing. So you'll be able to use New Ledger and Old Ledger simultaneously, and a lot of people already are. There's field testers who did that and customers who've migrated since our August 22nd release. And they have the option to just run it side by side. And it allows you to take the things that you do in Old Ledger and do those in New Ledger and kind of figure out how things are going to work. There have been people who have gotten started and they've been kind of playing with New Ledger. If you need to kind of kick the tires and do bogus transactions, once you're ready to kind of fully move forward, let us know. We can wipe the New Ledger site without losing any of your other data and then remigrate your data over. And it's something we've been doing for 6 months now, it seems like. So if you need to wipe and re-migrate, you can definitely do that. It's safe. We've done it, several hundred times at this point of the game. So, but feel free to work with us on this. So, absolutely, feel free to run both systems at the same time to get a better understanding of how the software will work for your church. Question: what data migrates over from old ledger to new ledger? And all of your data will migrate over from old ledger to new ledger except recurring transactions not created from a transaction. And I didn't include the fiscal year transactions because those are just recalculated. I don't want to cause any confusion there. What if we do not have Church360 members? So Old Ledger was a standalone software that was just kind of doing its own thing. Like you're able to connect between the two products. You post a offering batch in Old Ledger. I'm sorry, you post an offering batch in members, it would flow over to Old Ledger. And that is still the case, though there still flows over. There's a post button, and I'll show that during our transactions channel training. But we can set up your church with a reduced functionality free Church360 member site that allows you to be able to use the software. So, it won't cost you anything to get started inside of there. You just won't have full functionality. Okay, questions. Do I have to migrate at the end of the month or year? And this kind of goes back to what I was saying about, we're not forcing people to migrate right now. It won't last forever, but you can pick the time frame of when you want to migrate. The answer is no, you may migrate at any time due to the way Church360 migrates the data. So it migrates all your transactions over, all your balances, everything migrates over. The caveat though, with that said, stopping on a specific date, not data, and clearing out pending transactions is encouraged so that report comparisons can be made between the two softwares. So can you do it at any time? Yes. Whether or not the two reports will fully make sense, you'll want to think about that some. Okay, and that was my last frequently asked question or common questions. Let me look at the questions here in the question window. Okay. Okay, Jackie asked about comparing the two. There is a title on the new one, so you should be able to compare between the two. But if it's not, let us know and we can help you out with that. Did I say that was recurring transactions? How do you tell the difference between the two types of recurring transactions? It's not obvious in the old software, but once you migrate, you can compare the two software and then you'll be able to tell the difference. Is there a role that allows personnel to see macro finances for details, but no actual names, aggregated totals, giving by giving them units with percentages? The use case would be for organizations where pastoral care needs to be aware. Yes, there is a way to share reports, and I believe that the way those would work is they could see the reports and they would be rolled up so it's at the higher levels instead of the lower levels. And I'll look into that a little bit more to see the possibilities, and we'll send you a follow-up on that one. But I think that's good. And there's some other reporting that we're working on. So thanks, Byron. Catherine asked if there's a sandbox. There is no sandbox. You can migrate your data, play with it, wipe your site, and then remigrate your data. Like no harm, no foul type thing. Because the old data in old ledger is completely separate and it would not be affected by the stuff that you're doing in new ledger. Byron asked if the subscription model would remain the same, 2 separate licenses. The subscription model is the same for now. Jackie says she is ready now. So I'm ready to get the new system. What is my very first step? You can feel free to call me. But as Kimberly just posted, if you schedule a session, that is the best way to move forward. So, and if you want to do it on your own, we can just flip it on. But I think most people are going to have questions and want to, kind of conversate and talk about the nuances. That was Jackie. Hi, Scott. Scott asked, is there a new Church 360 that we need to be using before we migrate to new ledger? There's not a new Church 360, even though there is a new like navigation. And if you migrate to the new ledger, it forces you into that new navigation. So it takes your bar from the top and runs it down the left-hand side. We've only had maybe 1 or 2 people over the last, let's see, that was probably sometime in month 4 or 5. So it might have been before then. So maybe let's say in the last 5, 6 months who had confusions about the change. Yeah, it's definitely in a different spot, but most people are pretty comfortable with it. So that change, it does have to happen, but it's not a completely new Church 360. Like all the things are still there, it just looks a little different. Hi, Deborah. Deborah asked, I cannot attend Wednesday's class. Will I be able to access the video on Friday? We believe you'll be able to access the videos by Friday. Yeah. And Wednesday is transaction, so you'll definitely want to see that one. Oh, hey, Byron. Will the existing URL for Church 360 be used to access the new ledger? And the answer is yes. So you'll, I guess once you completely sunset old ledger and you're just using new ledger, you would access that through the Church 360 URL. And it's gonna be hard for me to stop saying Church 360 members after all these years. So, but yes, it's the Church 360 URL. You are correct. Okay, it looks like those are all the questions. So I will let you guys go. Feel free to reach out to me. You can also contact support. You can give me a call, shoot me an email, and we can just kind of work through this together. So I don't want anybody to think they have to go it alone on this. And if you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. All right. Well, I will let you guys get going and I will talk to you soon. All right. Thanks, everyone. I hope you have a blessed day.